Hi there, I'm Jayson Rivest, and in a previous video, I shared with you a technique that is helpful if you often find yourself worrying about what other people think about you. Well, today I'd like to share with you another technique that is also helpful for anxiety, but this one is applicable to a wider number of situations. So when I was in high school, I was what you would probably call a classic overachiever. I was taking all college prep classes, and I was involved in pretty much every club the school had to offer. And so out of necessity, I learned a lot about time management, and I learned a lot of techniques for dealing with stress. But none of those techniques could actually prepare me for what would happen during my sophomore year. So when I was a sophomore, my dad had to go to Saudi Arabia to fight in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And even though he was in the army the entire time that I was growing up, and there was always that sort of constant threat of having to go to war, it had never manifested, and so it wasn't something that I had experienced dealing with. And so when he actually did go away, I found myself, awash with this sort of free-floating anxiety where I would worry about whether or not my dad was going to come home safely. And, of course, that's a natural worry or anxiety to have when someone that you care about is in a perilous situation. Now, my mom was doing a really good job of, taking care of my brother and I and trying to keep us as optimistic as possible. And I think part of it was because she needed to be optimistic herself. And, as an empathic person, I realized that the amount of strain and stress that she was under. And so I did whatever it was that I could to prevent her from seeing that I was actually going through those same emotions. And so I was fortunate that in all of my activity with the clubs at school, I had become friends with one of the advisors. And so one day while I was at school, he pulled me aside and he asked me how I was doing. Now, of course, I knew that he knew that my dad was away at war. And so I took that opportunity to let out what I had been holding in. And it was an emotional meeting for me. And, he listened, caringly. And, as I told him that I was worried about my dad's safety and I would have these recurring dreams that my dad wasn't going to come home. And so he listened, and then when he felt the time was right, he asked me whether or not all of the anxiety and sort of torture that I was putting myself through, whether or not that would have any real impact on whether or not my dad was going to come home. That was a very sort of sobering question because I had been so locked into the experience of feeling those emotions, feeling that anxiety, that I had never stopped to consider whether or not I could control the outcome. And so I admitted to him that of course no amount of worrying was going to change whether or not my dad was going to come home. And so he offered the suggestion that my energy would be better spent focusing on things that I actually could control. So things like my schoolwork or my extracurricular activities or anything else that I actually did have a direct impact on. And that lesson that he shared with me that day is one that has stayed with me my entire life. And I have to say that now that sort of thought process or that way of looking at things is, sort of second nature to me. So I don't really think about it in terms of, asking myself those questions all the time. But I wanted to share this with you because I feel that it's a really powerful technique. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're worrying about things that you don't have control over, stop yourself. Because really the only things in life that you have control over are your own actions and the way that you react to things. And so unless you can directly impact something The only thing that you can do is worry about, those two things. So if, for example, you are able to control the outcome, then by all means do so. Figure out what goal it is or what the result is that you want and pursue it. Pursue it with all of your passion and let whatever fear or anxiety that comes up only serve as fuel. I want to remind you that, fear is our body's way of getting us ready to do whatever it is we need to do. We all know about fight or flight, and most of the time, unfortunately, we're taught that fear is a bad thing. We're taught to sort of curl up in a ball and, steal ourselves away and get ready for whatever's coming our way. When in fact, what's happening is your body is flooding you with all of this energy so that you can be ready to do whatever it is you need to do. So if you're working on something that you do have control over, use that fear, use that anxiety to give you the energy to pursue your goal and your result with a clear laser focused vision. Now, if you don't have control over whatever situation you are involved in, you do have control over how you react to it. So in the earlier video that I shared with you, the technique called the power of so what, I talked about sort of the power behind that being, thinking in advance about what the outcome it might be if you did something and you were worried about what other groups were thinking. So in a situation that you don't have control over, what you do have control over is how prepared you are for that situation. So just like in the other technique, I want you to stop and think about, okay, so I don't have control over this, but what I do have control over is how I'm going to react to it. So let's say, for example, you go for a job interview. Once you have the interview and you've sent your thank you note and you've done your follow-up calls and all that due diligence, it's really out of your control. And so the only thing that you can do is control your reaction. And so rather than sitting there anxiously waiting for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, however long it takes for the decision-making process at the place that you interviewed, rather than spending all of that time focused on, oh, am I going to get it? Am I going to get that job? I really need that job. I've got bills coming up. What you should be doing instead is taking all of that energy and looking at your resume, or figuring out, like, what can I do to make this even better? And then get out there and start interviewing for other jobs. There's that old saying, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that's a saying for a reason, because if you put all of your energy and focus into one thing and you're not prepared in the event that doesn't manifest, then you've wasted your time and you're in no better situation than you were. Now, if you do end up getting the job, all the time and energy that you put into, refining your resume and going applying for other jobs isn't really wasted, because it helped you stay focused on positive things that you can control, but also it's given you sort of a measure of confidence, knowing that even if the worst thing happens, you are self-reliant enough to be able to take care of things. So in closing, I want to remind you that the only things you can control are yourself, your actions, and your reactions to things. And spend your energy wisely. Spend it on those things that you can control, and let go of those things that you can't. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you find the technique helpful, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I post new videos every week with tips on how to unlock your potential, release fear, and tap into your hidden creativity. As always, I would love to hear from you, so if you have any questions or feedback on this video or any topic, please leave them in the comment section below. Alright, so remember, focus on what you can control, be kind to yourself, and have an amazing weekend.